Welcome, everybody, and thank you guys for joining. My name is Eric Marsi. I'm a Day 2 cloud engineer with T2M Works. And today we're going to be talking about migrating from Skype for Business Server to Microsoft Teams from an enterprise voice perspective. So we're going to go start off with a little bit about me. We're then going to hop into the purpose of today's session, overview of the lab environment that was used for this topology. And then we're going to hop into the planning of prerequisites phase, then follow that up with the migration process, testing, validation, cleanup. The demo is not going to happen within the time frame that we have today, and then we will finish up and wrap up the presentation. So as an introduction, I'm from Barberton, Ohio, and I am a Day 2 cloud engineer at T2M Works, formerly Time to Market, if you guys knew that name. I am the organizer of the Columbus Teams user group, and that is part of the national user group at teamsug.com. I'm also a co-speaker at the Cleveland Teams user group with Dustin Miller. I am a MCSE and MCSA in Office 365. And IT overall has been a lifelong passion and hobby for me. I am one that considers myself more of a converged engineer more than just static UC, as I can handle anything from networking to your infrastructure to servers to talking with business leaders and so forth. The UC interest that I'm working with today actually took off in early 2016, so I'm fairly new to the community. The company I worked for at the time had a migration from a Toshiba phone system to Skype for Business, and that's when my first kind of introduction to UC really took place and fell in love with it. Later that year, in the spring of April 2016, Dustin actually started up the Cleveland Teams user group. Formerly at the time, it was called the Skype user group, and that was pretty much like one of the ways that I first learned a lot about Skype for Business Server, and which is where everything kind of took off from there. So the purpose of today's session is to learn what Microsoft Teams is, how to plan for a seamless migration, learn about the different coexistence modes that are currently available today, determine what prerequisites are needed before the migration from your on-premises infrastructure can occur, learn about how to migrate all internal / related services to Microsoft Teams / cloud voicemail and auto attendance, and learn some best practices along the way. Quick overview of the lab environment that we've used for this presentation. It consists of a standard edition Skype for Business 2019 front-end server that has users on it, response groups, and it is integrated with cloud voicemail and Office 365. There is a Skype for Business Server 2019 Edge server, a IIS AR reverse proxy. Keynote there, if you are running this on-prem, make sure you guys switch over to use something like a Kemp, as that is not supported. A domain controller has AD, DHCP, DNS, certificate authority, and Azure AD Connect. And then last but not least, a AnyNode SBC. By the end of this presentation, the goal is to just have a domain controller without that CA role, and then also the AnyNode SBC for Teams direct routing. And this is just a quick overview of the topology that how it is in the current how it is currently. So we're going to hop over into the planning prerequisites phase. And first, I'm sure most of you guys already know, but in case you do not, we need to first identify what is Microsoft Teams. So Microsoft Teams is the ultimate messaging app for your organization, a workspace for real-time collaboration, communication, meetings, file and app sharing, and even the occasional emoji, all in one place, all in the open and accessible to everyone. And so the big thing about Teams is that it really combines all of Microsoft 365 into one application for your users to use. So if you're currently using Skype for Business Server, why would you want to migrate? One big one would be cost reduction, and that is more or less a business decision, because instead of having to spend anything on existing infrastructure, you can leverage existing Microsoft 365 licensing that you already are paying for. And especially without having that infrastructure on premises, you're moving everything to the cloud. You're not paying for that, the power, the hardware that you have to cycle out every few years. You're really saving a lot of money when you look at it from a whole. Additionally, it also simplifies security strategies at locations. You're no longer bringing everyone into your network. You're actually pushing everybody out of your network. So less firewall rules, less things that could potentially use as a loophole in case of a vulnerability would be found. Another big one is that Skype for Business Server 2018 support ends in October 2024. And now that is currently provided that there are no additional versions produced. If they continue to produce Skype for Business Server, that date will be extended. But at this time, there is no versions past Skype for Business Server 2018. The other big reason why you might want to migrate is that there is an improved mobile client experience. So I'm sure plenty of you guys have actually used the Skype for Business mobile app, and that app needs some help. It used to be great with Windows Phone, but the Android and iOS counterparts never actually took off, and those devices really never had a app that worked. You open it up, you have to download all your conversations. It was just really bad. Having Teams as a modern application allows your mobile workers, your frontline workers, to really have an application that works for them no matter where they're at. If they're in the field, if they're at home, no matter where they're at, they can join in and access everything that they can on their computer. Why might not you want why to not migrate? Sorry. You might have already in a huge investment in existing infrastructure. So, for example, if you just deployed Skype for Business Server, you probably just bought some VVXs. There's also perhaps a chance that you even have one of these bad boys, a CX700 sitting around. You would not want to move to Teams because a lot of those devices are not going to be supported going forward. Any type of 3-pip device is supported as of right now, but as soon as Skype for Business Online goes away, that feature set will eventually disappear. Another big one is that Teams does not have all the features that Skype for Business Server is able to provide on premises. And that more or less comes down to the voice routing capabilities at this time. Teams is still an evolving product. It is getting better every day, but there are a lot of advanced features that are still not available within Microsoft Teams. And again, it goes back to the end user devices. If you have existing CX700s or CX600s, I hope you don't, but in the event that you do, those devices for sure with Teams. So you want to first evaluate your environment. You need to find out where your users are home. Do you have 15 pools spread across the globe? You need to find out where and identify where those users are all home at. You also need to identify how large your Skype for Business deployment is. And then you also need to make a key decision on whether or not you want to keep your phone numbers on premises, port to Microsoft, use direct routing, or a third party. So pretty much, if you want to leave those numbers in on premises and you have like an existing contract with a phone vendor, you might have a 3-year contract and you're only on year 1 right now. You have 2 more years to go. You don't want to have to pay those early termination fees. So what you could do is you could use direct routing and connect that on-premises SIP trunk or PSTN connectivities directly to Microsoft Teams and continue utilizing that service within the new application. You also have the ability to port those numbers over to Microsoft and pay $12 user a month for domestic and $24 a month for international calling. Now, that does get pricey for large organizations with multiple users, which is where direct routing really comes into play. You also need to figure out if you're using Exchange server on premises or if you're fully using Exchange Online and Microsoft 365. And you also need to determine if you need any type of legacy device support. And that is really kind of comes back to the direct routing piece, where if you are using something like a PA system or something else on premises that is analog, you for sure will need to deploy direct routing for at least those phone calls, not for your entire phone system. You can kind of mix the two together between calling plans and direct routing. You just need to kind of determine if you do need that functionality going forward. You also want to perform a network assessment. So you need to verify that your network is capable of handling Microsoft Teams. You might be working great today with Skype for Business, but again, it kind of goes back to that original model where you're pushing people out of your network. You're not bringing them into your network. Meaning, if your internet connectivity does not have enough bandwidth available, you might run into a subpar experience using Microsoft Teams. You also need to determine an extensive functional validation testing checklist. So you need to ask yourself, what do you need for your Teams deployment to be successful? You need to define use cases and requirements for different organizational units within your organization, so like HR, finance, etc., and determine what they need out of Teams going forward from enterprise voice, from the team channels, and so forth. And then pretty much create that complete testing list and really get down to the nitty gritty. If you're creating a cloud auto tenant, put in there each and every menu option that is available in that auto tenant. So this is a little bit of the methodology that we are going to be going through. And we just pretty much started with the planning. We're going to be heading into the migration phase. We're going to then hit into validation, where we are going to test those FETs that we just identified. And if the test did not pass, we are going to have to repeat that FET and fix whatever was not working. And as soon as those tests all pass, then we are going to move into the cleanup phase and then the final steps of the migration. So what type of prerequisites do you need? So you need to have Skype for Business Server 2015 or Skype for Business Server 2019. If you're running 2015, the current version is Cumulative Update 10 Hotfix 1. And if you're running Skype for Business Server 2019, you can run any version. The current version is CU3. For Skype Server 2015, you do need to be running CU8 or higher to have that Teams migration capability available. You also need to have hybrid connectivity to Skype for Business Online. So that's a few commands on premises, one command in the cloud, and you can get that hybrid connectivity going. And then Microsoft today actually launched the small business voice plans. So you need to either have one of those, or you need to have an enterprise E1, E3 with phone system, or an E5 to take advantage of the Microsoft Teams voice features. Also, if you are retaining the SBC on premises, you do need to make sure that you get Teams direct routing configured. Feel free to reach out to my blog, www.ucit.blog, for a step-by-step guide to actually deploy Teams direct routing. So what is direct routing? So direct routing allows you to interop with third-party systems in your environment. So it allows companies to migrate users and groups and provides interop between them without having to, oh, we're shutting you guys off. You simply just change the routing of those DIDs from your Skype for Business environment to straight into Teams. So as soon as you move those users, they've already got the voice functionality available in Teams. It allows you to integrate third-party PBXs, analog devices into the Microsoft Teams phone system. And as discussed before, it allows you to continue those existing phone contracts that you have with different service providers, in case you don't want to pay those early termination fees. It also allows you to simplify the cost of having a single DID for every user, because when you look at Teams direct routing, if you have a 100-person organization, that's right there is just $1,200 a month in US dollars for domestic calling plus tax. And that can get very costly, whereas you can save on that with a standard SIP provider, where you can usually get DIDs for $1 a month and pay per minute for each and every call. The other big reason why you might want to use direct routing is you're able to use it where calling plans are not available. Because calling plans are not available in every country, you might have some specific country that needs to have its own phone system, but doesn't actually have ability to do that within Microsoft's calling plans. So it allows you to leverage that on-premises PSTN connectivity to go ahead and continue having phone calls for those people in those locations. Now, the big thing that was discussed before is you can combine direct routing with calling plans. So maybe you want your US users all on calling plans through Microsoft. You want Microsoft handling the voice aspect of your environment. You can also go ahead and just use direct routing to kind of add in those other sites that maybe, hey, the cost here is too expensive. Let's use these sites for direct routing and so forth. So the meeting migration service. So the meeting migration service is a service that updates the online meeting information block in your calendar when the following scenarios are triggered. So when a user is migrated to the cloud from on-premises to Skype for Business Online or Teams only, the meeting migration service will kick in within 4 hours and start moving the meetings so that the conference IDs and everything will match either Skype for Business Online or Teams. When an administrator changes a user's audio conferencing settings, when an online user is set to Teams only or the Skype for Business with Teams Collab and meetings. So if you're changing those coexistence modes, that will automatically kick off. Now, the key start here is that is not at the organization level. If you go into your organization, you say, okay, everybody's in this coexistence mode inside the Teams Admin Center, it is not going to kick off that meeting migration service. It has to be done at the user level for that service to kick off. And then also, if you do it via PowerShell to start CSEX meeting migration commandlet. So there are some limitations. The user's mailbox must be hosted in Exchange online. It cannot be hosted in Exchange on premises. And then I believe somebody has their mic unmuted, unfortunately. And additionally, the user is being migrated from Skype for Business Online to Skype for Business Server. There is no way for the online to back to on-premises to change that meeting information block. And again, as noted previously, it is only invoked when it is set per user, not at the organization level. So will my desk phone work with Microsoft Teams? Existing Skype for Business certified phones will continue to work. However, that is with limited functionality. So 3-pip devices such as your Polycom VVX, actually have one back there. Those will no longer work with Teams after July 31st, 2023. So you still have some time with some limited functionality on those devices, but keep in mind that those will stop working eventually once the Skype for Business Online infrastructure that supports those will be turned off fully. Link Phone Edition devices no longer work as of October 2018. Microsoft did enforce the 3DS encryption. So that is no longer available in Office 365. So those devices do not work at all with anything Microsoft 365. Consider upgrading to some Teams certified phones. So certain models will work with both Skype for Business Server and Teams. So like an Audio Code C450 HD, a Yealink T58A. There's plenty of phones from many excellent vendors that support both Skype and Teams. So if you want to start rolling those out today before you actually do migrate, you can do so with the different firmwares that are available on them. They can be costly compared to some Skype for Business variants. So keep in mind, when choosing a model that, you could potentially move some of those users to using headsets instead of actually using desk phones with using Teams. Pretty much the way that I see desk phones is that you want to have that for like your executive people, but your more frontline workers, your everyday office worker, you do want to go ahead and try to get those people on headsets to reduce costs from the migration. So there are some different coexistence modes, and I could sit here and talk about this easily for an hour. But the 3 big ones is that most likely your tenant right now is in islands mode. Want to get out of that. But if you're planning a migration, we're going to go ahead and switch between the different coexistence modes. First, integration with Skype for Business Server. So first, you want to start off with Skype for Business with Teams collaboration only. So Teams is able to be logged into by the user, and they're able to use Teams, but they cannot use it for meetings. They can't use it for chat. They can't use it for calling. After you hit that phase and you've kind of brought your organization into using Teams, they can then move into using meetings first, which allows them to use Teams for meetings, and actually it effectively disables the Skype for Business conferencing aspect by removing the add-in from Outlook. It does not affect the server at all. It just goes ahead and removes the meeting from Outlook, having the ability to schedule a Skype for Business server meeting. And then eventually by the end, you do want to get into Teams only, which is the end goal of all the organization once Skype for Business Server has been turned off. So again, stay out of islands mode. There's a big thing with user confusion, as messages in Skype for Business only route to Skype for Business, and messages in Teams only route to Teams unless it's going back to a Skype user where it will go back to their client. But the issue that runs into is you're going to have chats here, you're going to have chats there, and they're not combined, they're separate. You want to make sure you stay out of islands mode as much as possible. If you are more of like an IT department, you are testing the Teams features out, it's okay to be in that, but try to limit how much time you are in islands mode because it does bring a lot of confusion. And again, start with the meetings, start with collab, and then collab and meetings first for the organization. Depending on the size of the organization, changes the user organization level. If you have maybe like a 20-person organization, flip that switch and let's get everything migrated over and start moving those coexistence plans quicker. But if you're a larger enterprise, make sure you're doing that with identified groups from the FET. So starting off, some things we do want to first notify the users of the migration. So begin communicating these to your organization. Some different things you could do is like device roadshows, some training, do lunch and learns. Not really that possible right now with the whole COVID-19 coronavirus, but once things kind of do get back to normal, that is a great way to start, showing users the adoption methods and how to actually use Teams. You can also do like Ask the Expert, intranet messages, and also Yammer to get that information out to your organization. Now, keep in mind, the coexistence modes that are set in the Teams Admin Center does not modify on-premises users. So if you do set that, it does modify the way that Teams works and how it affects Outlooks. but it does not limit the features in Skype for Business Server. So, for example, if you were to say in Teams Admin Center, I want to notify my Skype for Business users that, hey, we're moving to Teams soon, they are not going to see that pop up inside the Skype for Business client. You actually have to do that on premises with some commandlets. So you first need to define a Teams upgrade policy, and the identity in this scenario is just called enable notifications, and then it has a flag to notify the SFB user and set that to true. You also need to enable the automatic download of the Teams client. You can do this via the Skype for Business Server client, but if you don't want to do this, or maybe you already have Teams installed on people's computers, you can you don't have to worry about this commandlet. But pretty much it just modifies the configuration, and in this case, we're setting at the site level of MSFTT in this scenario. And then assign the policy at the global site pool or user level. So there's some commandlets there. So you could either apply that policy that was previously defined at the site, or you could just go ahead and PowerShell out and assign it to specific users just by setting it to the user's identity and setting that policy name to the previously one defined, called enable notifications. So now that we've kind of got the planning prerequisites in place, we're going to start with the migration process. So the big one is that we're going to move our Exchange auto attendants on premises to or response groups that are using like the interactive menu to cloud auto tenants. So there are two scenarios. If you are going to be retaining Skype for Business Server for an extended period of time, or if you do want to continue retaining Skype for Business Server even after the migration is complete, you might want to consider creating these on premises and syncing those to the cloud. The big reason why is that if you want the cloud auto tenant to be able to route to an on-premises user, the resource account has to be available on premises for Teams Online to know how to route that back on premises. If you create it as a cloud-only account, you are going to see some errors originally when you do create the account. I will get to the workaround on that, but you'll only be able to reach out to anybody that is currently in Teams only mode with those resource accounts. So the big thing is if you do create it, it's a new CS hybrid application endpoint on premises. But if you are doing that in the cloud, you can go simply to the Teams Admin Center, add a resource account, and set the display name, what it is, whether it's an auto tenant or call queue, and set the address. Now, if you use your domain that is SIP enabled for your Skype for Business deployment, you are going to see an error that's going to prevent you from doing so. The workaround for this, if you're just going, we're moving everybody to Teams, we don't care about the on-premises users, set that to your onmicrosoft.com domain. Go back into the Office 365 Admin Center, change the domain, and then that will be back to the original domain that you want that to be. So that is just kind of a workaround. Now, after you have created that resource account in the cloud or on premises, you do need to assign a virtual phone system user license to that user. So simply do that for the O365 Admin Center, and then open the auto tenant wizard and design the auto tenant as you want it. At the end of that, make sure that you do select the resource account so that it knows to go to that number. Now, if you are creating this on premise and fully in Skype for Business Online, you have to connect to Skype for Business Online and assign a DID to that number if you are using Teams direct routing. If you are not using direct routing, you're using a calling plan for that phone number, you can just simply assign that calling plan to that number. But if you're using direct routing and you created that online, you are going to have to connect to Skype Online PowerShell and run the set CS Online application instance and set the on-prem line URI. Now, in a scenario where you create that on premises, anything that you create on premises will sync over to Office 365. So when you set that phone number on premises, that does sync over to Office 365 through Azure AD Connect. So there are some new features coming soon. Extension dialing actually already did come out. The voicemail shared mailbox for auto tenants call queues did just recently come out as well. But one feature that does not exist currently is the ability to transfer calls to the PSTN from auto tenants or call queues. A way to work around that is just by creating a fake user and setting the forwarding on that user to a DID. So if you're using Skype for Business Server, you can do that. But if you are using Teams only, you make sure you are paying for that user and you're paying for a full license. So it will cost you some money until that feature does come out. Similar to the auto tenants, you're going to do the same process for the resource account, determine if you want that to be able to call people on premises or just cloud only. And then you do want to also create a group or distribution list for the call queues to determine the membership of that. So create like an Office 365 group and say, okay, I want all my HR members in this. That will then take all those people that are part of that Office 365 group and put them as part of the call queue. And that is during the setup wizard that you do define that of the cloud call queue. Now, again, like the auto tenants, I do have to connect to Skype for Business Online PowerShell and do a set CS on application instance and set that on-prem line URI for that user. Now, if you are using Call Park on premises today, you might want to retain that functionality with Teams going forward. To enable Call Park, you're going to log into the Teams Admin Center. You're going to expand voice and then Call Park policies. And then you can either modify the global policy and enable it for everybody, or you can create some user policies and assign to just specific people if you want to enable that just per your organization for like different groups. And make sure you toggle the switch that says allow call park, and you can actually see that up here in the top right. And then define the number range that you want to use for call park. So when you actually do park a call, it's going to ask, hey, what number do you want to put it on, or it's going to automatically do that. You can just go ahead and tell the person, hey, I parked a call at line 11. You could then they'll dial 11 on their phone, and then they'll get that parked call. Make sure you click save, and then that policy will apply to the Teams client. Now, there is another one that you could also add to that if you are using them, and that is SLAs on premises. So if you're using like a boss admin type SLA, make sure you do migrate those over to a cloud call queue as well. So now that those are done, we can start to begin with our user migration. So we're going to begin first with a pilot group, and we're going to determine which users we want to migrate first. So this could be like your internal IT team. You want to move them first, make sure everything's working fully before moving the entire organization. So if you want to do this via the GUI, you want to open Skype for Business control panel, navigate to users, click find, and then select the users in the list that are part of the pilot group. The quick way to do this is just by simply holding the control key. And then you're going to click on the action button, and then move selected users to Teams. And then it's going to ask you to sign to Microsoft 365 using a .onmicrosoft.com email address as a global admin. Now, if your global admin account is not a .onmicrosoft, you could simply just go quickly change that and use that in this scenario. But what you could do if you're doing multiple users at once is you can do this via PowerShell and just do an override admin domain switch on the move CS user command line. After you click OK, the users will then begin to be migrated over to Office 365. Now, at that moment, the user's client is going to sign out. And once the user signs out, we're going to kind of get into that in the next spot. Now, one quick thing is that if you are using the Skype for Business Server 2019 modern control panel, there is a few little differences with this process. It's very similar, but you do have to set up an Azure App Identity. So check out my blog again to learn how to do that. Now, after the user has been signed out of Skype for Business, when they attempt to sign in, they're going to get a Modern Auth login. So if you did not have Modern Auth enabled previously, they're going to get this Modern Auth login. Once signed in, they're going to get a prompt in Skype for Business saying that, hey, your organization is now using Teams. You're no longer in Skype for Business. Click this button to open Microsoft Teams. However, they can still click Start Skype for Business. And what actually is happening is the client is signing into your on-premises server. The on-premises server is saying, hey, you're not homed here anymore. You're in sipfedonlinelink.com. It's then going to authenticate against Office 365 and then pull in any meetings that you have from your Exchange online calendar. So what it allows you to do is if you had any previously scheduled Skype for Business meetings, you can still open the Skype for Business server, Skype for Business client, and still join those Skype for Business meetings just like you're still in Skype for Business. And in the background, any meetings that were previously scheduled, again, are going to be migrated via the Microsoft Teams meeting migration service in roughly about 90 minutes. So user migration continued. Everything's migrated now, everything's fine, right? No. So the user is now missing an enterprise voice feature inside the Teams client. So right now, if you were to go into the Teams client after you move somebody from on-premises to the cloud, you're going to see that there is no dial pad inside the Teams client under the call tab. You must enable the user for enterprise voice, cloud voicemail, and assign a voice policy that was defined when you set up Teams direct routing. Now, that is if you're using direct routing. If you ported those numbers for those users over to a calling plan, you simply just want to log into the Office 365 Admin Center and go ahead and assign that calling plan and assign that DID to that user. In this scenario, though, we're going to go ahead and do what we need to do for a cloud for direct routing. So in this case, we're going to connect to Skype for Business Online and determine whether or not you're using standard authentication or multi-factor authentication. So if you have MFA for your global admin account, I hope you do. Make sure you do use those second lines of commands. And then to enable the user, and I apparently have the picture here messed up. 1 second. Picture is a lot larger than what it's supposed to be. And slideshow from current slide. And let's switch that back. Okay, there we go. So we are going to go ahead and set the CS user. The identity in this case, we're just doing test user 1. We're going to enable enterprise voice and hosted voicemail. And then what we can do is sometimes you do have to have the fully distinguished name for that user. So we could do a PowerShell command of get CS online user and then pretty much show where the user's coexistence modes is only Teams only, and the hosting provider is fully on premises. And select just the user's name, the on-prem line URI, voicemail, enterprise voice enabled. And then we can then go ahead and kind of find out what we need for those users and then assign a previously defined voice policy from the Teams direct routing setup to that user. So you could just do a grant CS online voice routing policy, put the identity to that user or the distinguished name for that user and set the policy name. In this case, the policy name that was defined previously under the Teams direct routing setup is just OH1. Right now, with how Teams is working with all the additional load due to coronavirus, there is a delay from when the dial pad does appear inside this Teams client. So previously, before this, sometimes it could take 6 hours. I'm now seeing this somewhere where it's taking even up to 24 hours. So do keep that in mind. Now, currently, that is not. This whole process is not able to be done via the Teams admin center in the GUI. At this time for direct routing customers, but if you are using a calling plan, you're able to do this fully inside the Teams admin center. So this is kind of an output of the commands that we just ran. In this case, this was a poll where we're seeing all the users that are Teams only, and that got moved from on premises. And then this other ones was just showing Teams users that are Teams only users migrated from on prem, and you can see that those users are listed there. And the PowerShell commands that get both of these are listed below. Now, after we've moved the users, we need to look at the device firmware upgrades. So native firmware for desk phones and conference phones that are supported by Teams going forward. So the AudioCude C450 HD, there's a simple toggle switch you can use on the latest firmware where you can just go ahead and flip it to Teams. So it'll kind of go from the Skype for Business app and boot into the Teams app. And then the Crestron devices, the Yealink devices, and the Polycom Trio, you do need to go ahead and update the firmware on those devices manually, so they are using Teams only. So any type of non-Skype for Business certified device, Teams online certified device, typo there, are considered 3-pip. And also, your Microsoft Teams room systems do need to have a little bit of a change. Now, the firmware is already up to date on those. They are updated as soon as an update is released to the Microsoft Store. But you do need to change the default mode on the console to use Microsoft Teams instead of Skype for Business. And you can do that via the app settings or a small little configuration XML you can place in a specific root directory on the MTR itself. So if you do that via like a remote file share or something, you can apply that. And as soon as the device reboots at 2:30 a.m., it'll go ahead and apply those settings. And then also, if you do have any type of busy light or blink light software devices out there, you do need to update the firmware on those, the software on the PC actually on those so that they work with Teams for presence. So now that that's done, we're going to start going into our testing and validation phase. So we're going to bring back that extensive functional validation testing that we defined previously. We're going to test all the requirements that are determined up front. So like on an auto tenant, click each menu option, verify the calls route to the correct users, call queues internally, externally, verify federations working, verify voicemails are routing to cloud voicemail, verify caller ID is working, and at the end, ask yourself, did I meet my team success criteria? If you did not meet that statement and you're running into a bunch of issues, you probably didn't plan that well. But if you did meet your team success criteria, you're in Teams. You're there, and that's what we want you to be at. So you can also use like professionals like myself or others, to make sure that you do actually have that migration process being done appropriately. And in essence, we do this once a week. Not really, but we do this more than the average internal IT individual who only does this once probably in their lifetime. So really look for a partner that can take you from what you have to where you want to go to ensure a seamless migration to Microsoft Teams. So now we're going to move into the cleanup phase. So we're going to have to reconfigure our SBC. So in this lab, we were using an AnyNode SBC, and a huge shout out to AnyNode for that. But the SBC no longer needs to route to Skype for Business. So if you're moving fully to the cloud, simply just turn off the appliances once the numbers have been ported away. And make sure you do cancel that service to your service provider, because I have seen in the past where people continue paying for the service that they had on premises, but aren't actually utilizing that service. So if you're using an AnyNode SBC, it's different per SBC. So in this case, in the SBC, we're going to move any type of connection to Skype for Business server. So we're going to go into the routing domain. We're going to remove Skype for Business server. And we're going to remove the Skype for Business server node as well. And then if there is any type of route filtering, make sure you do clean that up if you are just using Teams only. This environment originally just had 2 DIDs mapped to Microsoft Teams. So you can actually see that under the destination match for Microsoft Teams. Go ahead and remove those if you are just using one SIP provider to Microsoft Teams, but really it comes down to your organization's needs and what you guys are using on premises and in the cloud. So in the end, you can see now that the only 2 nodes that are listed is Teams Direct Routing and my SIP trunk provider, and that you no longer have the Skype for Business node on the left-hand side. So Skype for Business server retirement. After you have moved everybody to Teams, make sure that you actually moved everybody to Teams. So you can run a command, get CS user, where the registrar pool is not equal to null. So that will show anybody that has been removed from Skype for Business server. If you were to show the registrar pool, it would be something of the matter of something pool.domain.com. But if it is not equal to null, you're going to see everybody that was removed from Skype for Business server. So after you've made sure that everybody's been removed from Skype for Business server, you're going to make sure you want to update your external DNS records to point to Microsoft 365. So simply go into the Office 365 Admin Center, do a domain check, and just click on Check DNS. As soon as you click Check DNS in the Office 365 portal, it's going to say, hey, you need to switch these records to these. So instead of having your SIP fed and so forth pointing to your on-premises environment, those will now be pointing to Office 365. Also, you want to go through and delete any type of unneeded records. So your Meet Dot, Dial-In, Skype Web, Link Web, Skype Admin, anything that you had for your on-premises infrastructure that's not listed in the Office 365 Admin Center for Skype for Business is not needed anymore going forward. You also want to make sure you update your internal DNS records in the event of a split domain topology. So if you have Microsoft.com as your internal domain and as your external domain, you want to make sure you remove all those references internally as well, because if you don't remove those internally, then anybody internally trying to get to those records is going to get the old server addresses. Also, you want to disable the shared SIP address space in the cloud. So you're going to connect to Skype for Business Online again, and you're going to run a set CS tenant federation configuration and set the shared SIP address space to false. And then you're also going to want to go ahead and delete the attributes in AD and fully disable those users on premises so that there is no reference to them now that DNS is pointing away. So from one of your Skype for Business servers, this is kind of a command of no return. I mean, you could return potentially with a backup, but it would be very difficult if you have multiple pools. But if you do a get CS user, disable CS user, every single person, every single Skype topology environment in your environment will be removed from Skype for Business. So every single person will have those attributes pulled away from their account. After that is done, you are going to open a topology builder and remove the deployment and publish the topology. And that is an option under the action menu of topology builder. Now, after you publish the topology, you do need to remove the conference directory. So just do a get CS conference directory, remove CS conference directory, and then finalize the install. So you can use this commandlet or the deployment wizard on all servers. Make sure you're doing this on all your servers. So every front end, every edge, etc. So you're going to do a publish CS topology and then dash finalize uninstall. And after that is done, you're going to remove the CS configuration store location from Active Directory, which will remove the RTC application stuff from AD. And then also unprep the local domain and forest. So you could do a disable CSAD domain, set the internal domain name, and then force that away from AD. So additional items you might want to address, you do want to make sure you remove the DHCP options that you had pointing towards your Link Phone Edition or CX series phones. Also, you want to make sure you do update your internal documentation. A lot of organizations move stuff, but then they don't ever update their documentation. So if somebody in the future comes in, they're like, where's my Skype server? Also, make sure you clean up your firewall rules. If you had Skype for Business Server, you've got plenty of ports open right now for your edge servers, for your reverse proxies. Make sure you do clean up those firewall rules and close those open doors to your environment. So to wrap up, make Microsoft Teams yours. Microsoft Teams is yours to customize. It is not just a unified communications platform. It is a full-on collaboration platform. Build and design teams and other things within the application based on your organization's needs by department. And keep in mind that by default, anyone can create teams. So address security permissions within Microsoft Teams. And most importantly, and I could tell this to anybody, make sure you have fun with Microsoft Teams. It is designed to be a fun but also very productive application for your users in your organization, and it is a big step in towards moving everything to the cloud. And there's a huge potential for Teams, and I'm excited for the future and what it provides. So just as a quick note, if you do have any enterprise voice needs, feel free to reach out to the organization. I do work for T2M Works, and we are at www.t2mworks.com. And then also, I do want to give a special thank you to AnyNode, the software SBC, for licensing to build this presentation. Oliver, he's the CEO. He actually just had the presentation right before this on a absolute horrible Skype for Business Teams meeting. So reach out to his organization if you are looking at using Teams direct routing. His software SBC is easy to deploy. It is very modern. And I don't have anything other than great things to say for Oliver and his team. So thank you again, Oliver, for the licensing again to build the my lab and this presentation. Does anybody have any questions? Okay. And if nobody has any more questions, all the information you saw in this slideshow today is available on my blog, www.ucit.blog. We have plenty of information there, whether it's Skype for Business or Teams related. Feel free to check out the blog. I do have some exciting upcoming blog posts, so I look forward to seeing you guys all there. And last but not least, thank you all and welcome to the Microsoft Teams family.